My brother called me on a Tuesday, which should have been my first warning. He never calls on Tuesdays. He never calls, period, unless he needs something. I was sitting in the parking garage at work, engine still running, trying to decompress before the 40-minute drive home to Raleigh. I'd been staring at procurement spreadsheets for 9 hours straight. My eyes felt like sandpaper. I had a tension headache crawling up the back of my neck, the kind that settles in around 2 in the afternoon and doesn't leave until you've slept it off. I was 31 years old, a senior financial analyst at a mid-sized logistics firm, and I was so tired that I had eaten the same sad desk salad 3 days in a row without noticing. I looked at my phone screen, my brother's name. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered. "Hey," he said, and I could already hear it. That particular looseness in his voice. The casual tone that meant he was setting something up. "You coming to Mom and Dad's for Thanksgiving?" "It's October, Gabe," I said. I know. Just planning ahead." He wasn't planning ahead. He wasn't planning ahead. My brother had never planned ahead in his life. But I said yes because I always said yes, and we hung up, and I drove home with the headache still firmly in place, not thinking much of it. I should have thought more of it. I need to back up, because context matters here. My brother Gabriel is 34 years old. He lives 20 minutes from our parents in Greensboro, which is not coincidental. He has lived within a 20-minute radius of my parents since he was born, which is also not coincidental. He bounced through 3 different colleges before landing on a community college degree in business administration, which he has deployed in the following ways: 1 failed food truck, 1 failed dropshipping operation, 1 brief but memorable attempt at becoming a real estate investor that resulted in a dispute with a hard money lender, and his current position as assistant manager at an electronics chain, a job he has held for 8 months, which is, remarkably, his longest stretch of employment since 2019. My parents think he's finding his footing. They have been saying this since 2015. I left Greensboro at 22 for a finance degree at NC State, then stayed in Raleigh when I got hired. I drove back for holidays, birthdays, the occasional Sunday. Every time I made that drive, I felt the particular dread of someone walking back into a house where the emotional temperature has never once changed. Mom would hug me and immediately mention how tired I looked. Dad would ask about my retirement contributions with the energy of someone checking to see how much was left in a vat. And my brother would be there, comfortable and unhurried, existing in the warm center of their attention like a cat that had never once been asked to justify its presence. I had bought my condo 3 years earlier, a 2-bedroom in a good part of Raleigh near the Greenway, with parking and a small balcony where I kept a rosemary plant that was, against all odds, still alive. It was the thing I was most proud of. I had saved for it for 4 years, negotiated the price myself, paid my own closing costs. My parents had offered to help with the down payment and I had declined, mostly because I had seen what accepting that kind of help did to my brother, and I wanted no part of it. Thanksgiving came. I drove to Greensboro on Wednesday night because I couldn't take the traffic on Thursday morning, and I arrived to find my brother's car in the driveway next to an unfamiliar truck I didn't recognize. Inside, the house smelled like pie crust and that particular brand of holiday tension I had spent 31 years learning to read like weather. My brother was in the living room with a woman I had never met, a fact that became significant later. He introduced her as his girlfriend, and she seemed perfectly nice, and I noticed that she was wearing the kind of casual, expensive outfit that suggested she had money of her own, which I filed away without meaning to. Mom pulled me into the kitchen the second I put my bag down. "We need to talk to you tomorrow," she said, quietly, hands still in oven mitts. "After dinner. As a family." I looked at her. "Is someone sick?" No, nothing like that." She smiled, but it was the effortful kind. "It's just something we want to discuss. Together." I went to bed that night knowing full well that whatever was coming had already been decided. My family did not hold family meetings to discuss things. They held family meetings to present things. I was not going to be asked. I was going to be informed. The next day went fine, in the way that holidays with complicated families always go fine on the surface. We ate. My brother charmed the room. His girlfriend laughed at his jokes. Dad told the same 3 stories he always told. Mom kept everyone's glass full and received compliments on the stuffing with the worn modesty of someone who had heard them every year for 3 decades. I helped clear plates and tried to ignore the low hum of anticipation in my chest. After pie, after his girlfriend politely excused herself to take a call, after the dishes were stacked and the turkey was wrapped in foil, my father said, "Let's sit down for a minute." We sat. My brother was on the couch, relaxed, forearms on his knees. He looked like a man waiting for a movie to start. My mother had folded her hands on the kitchen table in a way that meant she had rehearsed this. My father stood near the window, the way he always did when he wanted to look in charge without having to make eye contact. "Your brother is in a bit of a tight spot," my father started. I said nothing. I waited. "He's gotten behind on some bills. Nothing catastrophic. Just a temporary gap. The job transition cost him more than he expected, and there were some credit card balances that got away from him." "How much?" I asked. My mother's hands tightened on each other. "We don't need to go into exact numbers right now. How much?" I said again. And this time it wasn't a question. My father looked at my brother. My brother looked at the coffee table. "Around $4,000, my father said, "in minimum payments that are overdue. His credit score is taking a hit, and we want to help him stabilize before it affects his ability to rent or—" "You want me to pay it?" I said. "We want you to consider it," my mother said quickly. "As a family contribution, not a gift necessarily. You could work out the repayment terms between you." I looked at my brother. He was still looking at the coffee table. He had the particular expression of someone who has outsourced his own embarrassment to other people, leaving himself with none of it. "Gabe," I said, "are you asking me for $4,000? He finally looked up. "I'd pay you back," he said. "You owe me $600 from 2021. That was different." "How?" He didn't answer. "We've all been stretched lately," my mother said, with the decisive pivot of someone redirecting traffic. "Dad's car needed that repair, and I've had the dental bills. We've helped Gabe as much as we can right now." We looked at the finances, and honestly, "Nora, you're in the best position of anyone here. You're doing so well." "I'm doing well because I don't spend money I don't have," I said. But even as I said it, I felt the familiar weight settling onto my shoulders. The weight of being the responsible one. The weight of being the one they called when the math didn't work out. I had been carrying it so long I sometimes forgot it was there until moments like this, when someone tried to add more to it. "It's not that much for you," my brother said. And there it was, the exact phrase, casual as breathing, that meant he had already decided my money belonged to him and was simply waiting for the paperwork to catch up. "It's $4,000, I said. "You make 6 figures. I have a mortgage, car payment, student loans, and a maxed FSA from a surgery I had in March that I'm still paying off," I said. "Which you would know if you had ever once asked." The room went very quiet. My father cleared his throat. "We're not asking you to drain yourself. We're asking you to help your family." "You're asking me to pay my brother's credit card bills because he can't manage his money?" I said. "And you're framing it as family loyalty." My mother looked pained. My father looked stern. My brother looked at the coffee table again. I stood up. "I need some air," I said. "I'll be right back." I walked out the back door and stood on the porch in the November cold and looked at my parents' backyard, the old swing set that had been rusting there since I was in middle school, and I let the cold air hit my face and I thought about something I had not yet told them. I had been planning to tell them over the holidays, but this seemed like as good a time as any. 4 months earlier, I had accepted a job offer in Denver. Senior analyst role at a health tech company, 40% raise, full relocation package. I had been going back and forth for weeks before I signed the offer letter. Part of me kept stalling because of exactly this, because I knew that 3 hours away by car was very different from a plane ride, and I knew what my absence would mean for the architecture of obligation my family had built around me. I had not told them because I hadn't bought my plane ticket yet, and some part of me, the part that had been setting the Thanksgiving table since I was 8 years old, was still not totally convinced I deserved to leave. I was standing on that porch, hands in my hoodie pocket, and I thought about that part of myself. And I thought about my brother sitting inside waiting for me to come back in and hand him $4,000, and I felt something shift. I went back inside. I'm not going to cover the credit cards, I said, before I had even fully sat back down. But there's something else I need to tell you. My mother looked alert. My father uncrossed his arms. I took a job in Denver, I said. I start in January. I've already signed the offer letter and I'm listing my condo next week. The silence that followed was a different kind than before. It was denser, more weather-like. My brother spoke first. Denver, he repeated as if I had said the surface of Mars. Yes. You're moving, my mother said. Yes. Without telling us. This was my father, and his voice had taken on that particular cold register that meant he felt his authority had been bypassed. I'm telling you now, I said. It happened fast. The offer came in August, I negotiated through September. I accepted in October. I've been trying to find the right moment. The right moment, my father repeated. I know it's a lot. I'm sorry for the timing. But the job is a really significant step, and I have to take it. So what about helping your brother? My mother asked, and I noticed that the conversation had snapped back to that like a rubber band. What about it? I said. You're selling your condo. You'll have equity. And there it was. Not, congratulations on the job. Not, Denver, that sounds like a great opportunity. The immediate computational leap to, you'll have money, and therefore you will give it to us. The equity is going toward a down payment in Denver, I said, which was not entirely true at the time, but became true in that exact moment. The market there is expensive and I need every dollar of it. You could at least help him with the immediate bills before you go, my mother said. $4,000 on a Denver salary is nothing. I don't have a Denver salary yet, Mom. I have a Raleigh salary and a mortgage, and a closing coming up in 8 weeks. My brother stood up. He was doing the thing where he paced, which he had learned from my father. So you're just leaving, he said. That's it. You decide on your own to uproot everything and move across the country, and your family is just supposed to be fine with that? I'm not asking for your permission, I said. I'm informing you. There's a difference. While simultaneously refusing to help, I have not refused to help, I said. I've refused to pay your bills. That's not the same thing. He made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. You've always done this. You always make everything about how responsible you are, like the rest of us are supposed to feel bad for not having your perfect little life. Gabe, my father said in a warning tone. But it was the warning tone of a man who mostly wanted to avoid a scene, not a man who actually thought his son was wrong. I looked at my brother for a moment. He was wearing a flannel I recognized as cashmere, and there was a newest generation phone on the couch cushion next to him, and his sneakers were a brand I knew cost over $200, and I thought about how he had said it's not that much for you, and I thought about the $600 from 2021, and I thought about every Christmas where I had contributed more than my share to the family gift pool, and every time I'd driven to Greensboro when asked without a second thought. I have something to show you, I said. I pulled out my phone. I had not planned to show them this. But something about the conversation had made a decision for me. I opened my email and scrolled back to November of the year before. I turned my phone to face them. That's my bank statement from last November, I said. I want you to see what was in my savings account. My mother looked confused. My father leaned forward slightly. I had $9,000 in savings, I said. By March, after my surgery and the bills and the co-pays and the 2 weeks I took unpaid because I couldn't work, it was down to $400. $400. I never told you because I didn't want to worry you and because I knew what would happen if I said I needed help. My mother's face changed. Nothing would have happened, I said. Or maybe you would have called Gabe and asked him to help me, and we both know how that would have gone. I handled it alone. I always handle it alone. That's the deal I figured out a long time ago. But you don't get to tell me I'm in the best position of anyone here when you don't actually know what my position is. The room was very still. My father sat down. I put my phone back in my pocket. I love you, I said. I'm moving to Denver and I'm going to be okay, and I hope Gabe figures out his situation. But I'm not the solution to it. I helped with the dishes. I slept in my childhood bedroom with the glow-in-the-dark stars still on the ceiling that I had put there in 5th grade and never taken down. In the morning, I drove back to Raleigh. The texts started that evening. "Mom, we need to finish this conversation." "Dad, the next morning, call me when you can." My brother did not text at all, which was its own kind of message. The silence from him usually meant he was waiting for the parental pressure to do the work. I called my parents that Sunday, and it went about how I expected. My mother cried, gently, in the way that is more effective than crying loudly because it places the responsibility for her distress entirely on whoever she is talking to. My father said he was disappointed in me, which still hit the same way it had when I was 16, even though I was trying very hard to build immunity. He said that family took care of each other and that I had the means to help and was choosing not to, and I said that I was choosing to protect my own financial stability before moving to a new city for a new job. And he said that was a very selfish way to look at it. And I said that I had spent most of my adult life looking at it the opposite way, and I needed to try something new. I listed my condo the following Wednesday. It went under contract in 6 days. Raleigh Market, November, 6 days. I had priced it carefully and staged it myself over a long weekend, and it worked. The number on the contract was better than I had expected, and I sat in my car in the parking garage and stared at it for a long time. I had not told anyone yet. I found out 2 days later that they already knew. My brother called me, not a Tuesday this time, a Thursday afternoon, and his voice had that specific quality of someone performing calm. "Hey! Heard about the condo? From who?" I said. "Mom ran into your neighbor at the Panera over on Wendover," he said. "Small world." I closed my eyes. "So you've got the equity coming," he said. "I have a closing cost and a relocation and a down payment on a Denver condo coming," I said. "Nora." His voice shifted. The performance of calm dropped about 20 degrees. "Do you understand what's going to happen to my credit score if these accounts go to collections? Do you understand what that does to someone? I won't be able to rent anything. I won't be able to get a car loan." "Then you need to call the creditors and set up hardship payment plans," I said. "They have them. I've used them. It's not glamorous, but it works. I need it handled now, not in a payment plan." "Why?" He paused. One beat too long. "Gabe," I said. "Why does it have to be resolved right now?" "Because." And then he stopped, and the stop was too clean, too deliberate. "Is there something you're not telling me?" I asked. "No," he said quickly, "because the conversation keeps coming back to urgency in a specific number, and that's usually because there's a reason for the urgency and a reason for the number." Another pause. "I told you the reason. You told me a reason." He hung up, not angrily, deliberately. I sat with that for a day. Then I called a woman I had stayed loosely in touch with from high school, a former coworker of my brother's, from a job he'd had 2 years back. We weren't close, but we were friendly enough, and I knew she still had connections to people who would know things about my brother's current situation. I did not tell her I was calling about my brother specifically. I just caught up with her, and halfway through the call she mentioned, unprompted, that she had heard something about a dispute at my brother's current job. "I don't know the details," she said, "but my cousin works at the same regional office, and apparently there's some kind of inventory discrepancy situation. Auditing something. I think it's still ongoing." Inventory discrepancy. I thanked her and got off the phone and sat very still. I started making calls. I have worked in finance for almost a decade. I know how to find paper trails. I know how to read public court filings. I know how to look at a situation and work backward from the numbers to the story they're telling. What I found took me most of a Saturday. My brother's credit card debt was not primarily lifestyle creep and bad planning, though there was some of that. The majority was restitution payments. Small amounts, spread across the last 2 years, going to 2 different parties. One appeared to be a private individual. One appeared to be connected to a former employer. I found a small claims court filing from 14 months ago. The amount was $3,200. The plaintiff was a business. The judgment had been entered against my brother and he had paid it in installments that had only recently been completed. And then I found the thing that made the room go sideways. There was a lien on my parents' house, filed 8 months ago. Not from a bank, not from a mortgage company. From a private equity lending company with an address in a strip mall in Charlotte that I could not find any information about beyond the filing itself. The amount was $60,000. My parents had taken out $60,000 against their house. My parents owned their house free and clear. They had paid it off in 2018, and my mother had mentioned it more than once as the thing she was most proud of. Mortgage-free, fully theirs. Not anymore. I pulled every document I could access. The lien had been filed while the property was in my parents' names. But 3 weeks after the lien was filed, there was a deed transfer, a quitclaim deed notarized and recorded with the county. My parents had transferred the property to my brother. I stared at the screen for a long time. They had given him the house, while it had a $60,000 private lien on it. Either they didn't know about the lien when they signed, or they signed anyway because Gabe had told them it was fine. I called the county recorder's office on Monday morning and asked a few careful questions. The clerk was helpful. The lien predated the deed transfer by 3 weeks, which meant that whoever had filed the lien had done so before the property changed hands, which meant the lien traveled with the property, which meant that my brother now technically owned a house with a $60,000 claim against it from a lender I could not verify. The credit card bills were $4,000. The credit card bills were a distraction. The real number was $60,000, and my brother had structured the whole situation so that if I handed over money to help with bills, it would go toward making payments on a lien my parents had no idea they had signed. Actually, that's not quite right either. What I still couldn't figure out was whether my parents knew what they had signed, whether they understood the lien, whether they understood what a quitclaim deed actually did, whether my brother had walked them through documents and told them one thing while the paperwork said another. I needed to find out. My parents' 35th wedding anniversary was in December. The plan had always been a small family dinner at a restaurant they liked in Greensboro, the Italian place they had been going to since before I was born. I had already made the reservation. I had already ordered my mother flowers. I almost canceled. I spent a week going back and forth. Part of me said to stay in Raleigh, let the closing happen, move to Denver, and be done with all of it. Part of me said that if I left without saying anything, I was choosing my own peace over the truth, and my parents were going to lose their house in a situation they may not have understood they were signing up for. I went. I wore the new blazer I had bought for my Denver interviews. I got there first. I ordered sparkling water and sat looking at the red-checked tablecloths and the drippy candles and wine bottles and the framed photos of Italian coastline, and I thought, this is the last time I do this. This specific thing. This driving to Greensboro out of obligation thing. After tonight, I am not doing it anymore. My parents arrived together. My mother looked lovely, actually, and I felt a pang for her when she smiled at me. She didn't know what was coming. My brother was 5 minutes behind them. He was dressed well, as always, and he clapped my father on the shoulder when he came in and kissed my mother on the cheek, and then looked at me with an expression that was almost entirely neutral, which told me he was managing something. We ordered. We talked about normal things. My mother described a quilt she was making. My father talked about the neighbor's new dog. My brother mentioned that his girlfriend had gotten a promotion, said it casually. The way people mention things they know make them look good by association. Partway through the main course, my father raised his glass for a toast. I let him finish. I smiled. I clinked my glass. Then I said, I actually have something I want to bring up if that's okay. I know this is your night, and I'm sorry to bring work stuff to the table, but I found something when I was going through paperwork for my closing, and I don't think I can sit on it. My mother looked curious. My brother looked at his plate. It's about your house, I said, and I was looking at my parents. Not at my brother. I'd printed the documents. I don't know why, exactly. I think because I know that when people are confronted with physical paper, it is harder to argue that the information isn't real. I had them folded in my bag. I took them out. There's a lien on your property, I said, sliding the first page across the table to my father. From a private lender. Filed 8 months ago. $60,000. My father looked at the page. My mother leaned over to see. I don't. My mother started. Do you remember signing anything last spring? I asked. Related to the house? Gabe might have brought you documents. The silence from my brother was total and specific. My mother looked at my brother. You said that was the refinancing paperwork, she said slowly. You said we were getting a better rate. My father was reading the document with his reading glasses now, the ones he kept in his shirt pocket. His face had gone the careful blank of a man absorbing information he does not yet know how to respond to. "There's more," I said, and I handed him the deed transfer. He read it. He read it twice. "You own our house," my father said, and he was looking at my brother, and his voice was so flat it scared me a little. "Dad, it was a legal strategy," my brother started. "Protect the asset. From creditors." "I was trying to protect it from creditors," my father repeated, "by putting it in your name, while putting a $60,000 loan against it." The loan was supposed to be short-term. There was an investment opportunity, and I needed to move fast, and I knew you guys had the equity, and I was going to pay it back before you even knew you mortgaged our house, my mother said, and her voice was perfectly quiet, which was somehow worse than if she had raised it. "The investment didn't work out the way I projected," my brother said, and he was losing the rehearsed quality of his voice now, going jagged around the edges. "It was bad timing. The market did something unexpected, but the loan payments are manageable if we—" "What was the money for?" I said. It wasn't a question. He looked at me. "The $60,000, I said. "Where did it go?" He looked back at the table. And I knew from the way he looked at the table, from the particular way he did not answer, that some or all of it was gone. Not invested, not delayed, not tied up in something recoverable. Gone. Bad bets, inflated expenses, the entropy of someone who had never once been asked to account for where money went, because someone had always materialized to replace it. My father stood up. He is not a tall man, but he has always occupied a room fully, the way people do when they are used to being the authority in it. He stood up and he looked at my brother for a long moment. "I want you to leave," he said. "Dad, I want you to leave this restaurant," my father said. "And I want you to go home, and I want you to find every document you had us sign, and I want them on my kitchen table by tomorrow morning." My brother looked at my mother. She was looking at her plate. He left. My parents and I sat there. The waiter came and refilled the water glasses with the particular trained obliviousness of someone who had seen family dinners go sideways before. My father ordered dessert, which surprised me. My mother folded and unfolded her napkin. "How did you find this?" my father asked finally. "I work in finance," I said. "I know what to look for." And I was already looking through public records for my own closing. He nodded slowly. "What do they do now?" my mother asked. "We don't have a mortgage. We never had a mortgage after 2018. We don't know how to deal with—" "You need a real estate attorney," I said. "A good one. There may be a fraud claim if he misrepresented what you are signing. I can find you some names." "How much is the house worth?" my father asked. "Based on comparable sales in your area, probably somewhere between 210 and 220, I said. "The lien is 60,000, so there's equity. But you need a lawyer before the lender does anything further." He nodded again. We ate the tiramisu in near silence. Driving back to Raleigh that night, I waited for the feeling I thought would come. The vindication, maybe, or the relief. Instead, I felt something more like grief. Not for my brother, not really, though somewhere in there was a sadness for whoever he might have been, if things had been different, mostly for my parents. For my mother especially, who had kept his secrets for 30 years and had finally had one turned against her. I texted them the next morning with 3 names of real estate attorneys in Greensboro, all with good reviews, all experienced in property fraud cases. My mother replied thank you. My father did not reply, which is normal. My brother called me 4 days later. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was about 4 minutes long and traveled through several emotional registers, starting with explanation, moving through justification, touching briefly on blame, and ending somewhere near pleading. He said he was trying to fix it. He said the investment had been for all of them. He said I had humiliated him. He said I could have come to him directly instead of bringing it to the table on their anniversary. I listened to it once and then I deleted it. My condo closed on a Thursday. I was at my desk at work when the wire confirmation came through, and I stepped out to the stairwell and stood there for a minute looking at the number on my screen. The equity, after payoff and costs, was more than I had projected. It felt impossible. It felt like something I had built slowly and quietly over years, stacked up in small decisions, and now it was real in this specific concrete way. I did not call anyone. I took the stairs back up to my desk and finished the rest of my day. I drove back to Raleigh on a Friday with a U-Haul that I had loaded with 2 friends' help and a lot of Diet Coke. And I spent the weekend in my empty condo with an air mattress and a box of kitchen stuff I hadn't shipped yet. And I thought about things. The way the light came through the living room windows in the afternoon. The rosemary plant which I had given to my neighbor. The specific sound of the building settling at night, which I had found alarming at first and then comforting and then so familiar it had become part of how I knew I was home. On Sunday night, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea and thought about my parents' house, about $60,000 borrowed against it and gone, about my mother's hands folded on a restaurant table, so still, about my father standing up, which had cost him something, I could tell, about my brother's voicemail which I had deleted without responding to, about how I was leaving the next morning, and none of it was my job to fix, about how saying that clearly to myself was still something I had to practice, the way you practice a new signature, a little unnatural still, but getting there. I flew to Denver on a Monday in January. Window seat, morning flight, the Rockies visible from 30,000 feet like something a child drew in crayon, improbable and enormous and totally real. I had a hotel reservation for 3 weeks while the condo purchase closed, and a start date at the new job. And one person I knew in the city, a college friend who had offered to take me to her favorite taco place when I landed. My parents are working with the attorney I found them. It is slow and expensive and there is no clean resolution yet, but there is a path. My mother texts me occasionally. Normal things, a recipe, a photo of the neighbor's dog, a question about whether I can see the mountains from my office. I respond. It is not warm exactly, but it is not hostile, and maybe that is the right temperature for now. My brother's number is still in my phone. I have not deleted it. I do not know if that is hope or inertia, or just the particular way grief keeps its records. He sent one text 3 weeks ago. I hope Denver is good. I read it and set my phone down and made coffee and stood at my kitchen window looking at the city, which is gray and wide and full of people who do not know anything about my family, which is its own particular kind of relief. I am in therapy now. My therapist is a small, serious woman in Capitol Hill who has a lot of interesting things to say about enmeshment and about the cost of being the competent one in a system organized around someone else's incompetence. We talk about my brother. We talk about my parents. We talk about the version of myself who drove to Greensboro every time she was summoned and called it love, when some of it was really fear. It is hard work. I am doing it anyway. Last Sunday I slept until 9, which is revolutionary for me. I made a French press and took it out to my balcony. I have a balcony here too, smaller, facing a courtyard, and I sat in the cold with my hands around the mug and watched a dog chase a pigeon across the courtyard. Flagstones with complete commitment and zero success. I laughed out loud. I was alone and nobody needed anything from me, and I laughed at a dog chasing a pigeon at 9 in the morning. I thought about that Thanksgiving table. The folded hands, the rehearsed speech, the expectation that I would simply absorb the cost of someone else's choices and call it family. I thought about the equity wire, about the attorney's name I had texted my mother, about the voicemail I had deleted, about my brother's face when I slid those papers across the table. The moment the clean performance of it cracked, and underneath was just a person who had never once been asked to stand in the consequences of what he'd done, blinking at the light. I took a sip of my coffee. Strong and hot, exactly how I like it. I was going to be okay. I've thought a lot about the moment I slid those papers across the anniversary dinner table. Not because it felt good, it didn't, not exactly, but because of what it cost me to get there. Years of driving to Greensboro when I didn't want to. Years of contributing more than my share and calling it normal. Years of being the one who handled things quietly so no one else had to be uncomfortable. The thing about being capable is that people treat it like a resource. Like your ability to manage difficulty means you have an unlimited supply of it and they're entitled to draw from it whenever their own wells run dry. My parents weren't cruel people. They loved me in the ways they knew how. But somewhere along the way, they had decided that my competence was a service I owed the family, and my brother had decided the same thing, and nobody had ever been asked to justify it, so it just kept going. What I've learned, slowly, in therapy, in the quiet of a city where no one knows my family history, is that actions compound. Every time my parents covered for my brother without consequence, they were teaching him that consequences were optional for him specifically. Every time I absorbed a cost without saying anything, I was teaching everyone in that family that I would continue to absorb costs. We were all reinforcing the same broken system, each of us doing our part. Mine just happened to involve a lot of spreadsheets and a very long drive on holidays. The lien on my parents' house wasn't a surprise ending to the story. It was the logical conclusion of 30 years of choices. My brother didn't wake up one day and decide to commit fraud. He woke up one day and did the thing that had always worked, which was to take money from the people closest to him and assume it would be smoothed over before anyone looked too carefully. He had just run out of people willing to look away. I didn't feel righteous when I handed my father that deed transfer. I felt tired and a little sick, and sad for my mother in a way that I'm still sorting through. But I did it because the alternative was leaving a truth buried, and that truth was going to surface anyway, just in a worse way, at a worse time, with less preparation. Finding it and bringing it to light was the most honest thing I could offer them, even if it wasn't the thing they wanted. Resilience isn't about being tough enough to absorb everything. I spent a long time believing that's what it meant, that if I could handle something without breaking, I should handle it. But real resilience is knowing which things are yours to carry and which things you've been handed by someone else's avoidance. Putting something down that doesn't belong to you isn't weakness. It's the clearest-headed thing you can do. I am 31 years old, starting over in a city where the mountains are visible from the highway and nobody has ever asked me to set a table I didn't want to sit at. My brother is dealing with consequences he created. My parents are working with an attorney and learning, at 60-something, what it costs to look away from someone you love. I am in therapy and drinking very good coffee on a balcony that is entirely mine. None of us got here by accident. We got here by accumulation, and the only way any of us move forward is by being honest about what we built and what it actually cost. That's the part nobody tells you. The freedom is real. But so is everything that had to break to get there.